I've been to church 3 times in my life. First time made me an atheist, second one made me an anti-theist, and the third one made me an activist. Now, I mostly managed to miss out on religion as a kid. My mother was religious, but she recognized churches for what they were and tried to keep her kids' brains unwashed. The sole exception was one weekend when my grandparents were watching my siblings and me, and they decided they could overrule my mom, so we went to Mormon church. And, of course, they didn't want their whole congregation to know what a bunch of unchurched heathens their grandkids were, so they told us to just play along and act like we knew what the hell was going on. Now, imagine that, if you will. You've been half-heartedly told that Jesus died on the cross and God knows when you touch yourself, and with no greater base of knowledge than that, you're dropped into a Mormon Sunday school and told to act natural. Needless to say, by the end of the story about the demonic octopus that would haunt me if I lied, I was firmly in the camp of the non-believer. Now, after that, I managed to avoid church for almost a decade, and it wasn't until I met a lovely young lady that would only fuck me if I got saved that I once again felt compelled by the power of Christ. And if you think being dropped into a Mormon church without context is weird, clearly you can't compare it to being dropped into a Pentecostal church. Now, to be honest, I only have 2 really clear memories of that service. One is where they're going around the room, they're saying, like, everybody says what they're praying for. Like, one lady will say, I'm praying for my grandma and her arthritis, and everybody wishes magically on that for a second. And then the preacher calls on somebody else, and she says, I'm praying for my old car that'll get me back and forth to work, and everybody wishes magically on that one. And during this bizarre little routine, he calls my girlfriend, and she says, I have an unspoken. I distinctly remembered thinking to myself, you bet your ass you do. And if you don't believe her, you can smell my fingers. Felt very proud of myself in that moment. But the other memory is probably a little more pertinent. And I go back and forth on whether it actually happened because it's been 25 years, and I know how memories like to fuck with you. But as near as I can recall, the pastor actually pounded his pulpit so hard that he broke it. Now, like I say, that seems so damn unlikely that I can't help but think my brain is exaggerating it. Like maybe he just knocked his glass off it and that broke. But the way I remember it, the feet of the thing broke off the right side and the whole goddamn pulpit went down, and he kept going. Now, one way or the other, whatever actually happened, he was definitely taking an unhealthy amount of sexual frustration out on that podium. And he was yammering about how God doesn't owe you an explanation for burning you in hell because he already gave you the Bible. And he told us that any one of us could die in a fiery car crash on the way home that night. And how sorry would we be that we'd picked on him then? And none of that struck me as particularly unusual because after that, people started speaking in tongues. And holy fuck, if anything can look unusual in comparison to some 65-year-old lady shaking on the floor while frantically spouting random Kevin Smith catchphrases. Now, the first time I saw this church shit, I was a little kid. All I knew is that I didn't have fun, and I was scared of my wacky wall walkers afterwards, so I didn't want to go back. But I was about 14 the second time, old enough to know that this wasn't just unpleasant, it was fucking scary. It was like insanity, but on purpose and institutionalized. And when you see it from the outside like that, it's painfully obvious what a fucked up scam it is. I mean, if you cut straight to the pitch on any con, it's a lot easier to see it's a con. So with all those years of indoctrination, all I see is a guy saying, if you stop coming here and giving me money, your brain ghost is going to get tortured forever and ever. You know, it doesn't exactly require a massive intellect to call bullshit on that. And when it's laid that bare to you, when you see the actual scam that's being perpetrated on some people from the cradle to the grave, it's all but impossible not to be morally repulsed by it. They've invented the most outlandishly self-serving lie you can imagine, and then they give it the illusion of authenticity by psychologically torturing children until they accept it. How could you look at that and not walk away appalled? So that's exactly what I did. For almost 2 decades, I didn't set foot in a church, and anytime somebody tried to convert me or harass me, they learned exactly where they could stick those pamphlets if they wanted to keep them warm. But that's all it was, right? Like, I hated religion with a passion, but not enough of a passion to do anything about it. If you ask for my opinion about religion, I'd give it to you uncensored, but nobody gives a shit about your opinion unless it's also their opinion, so it's not like it came up that often. In fact, I never really felt the activist in me stirring until the 3rd and last time that I went to church. Now, I've talked about this on the show before, so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail. I'll just say that my dad found religion when my mom was crazy sick, and he suckered Lucinda and me into going to church for some Christmas service that he was participating in. Now, he knew I was an atheist, but I'm pretty sure he was still expecting me to grow out of that at some point. So, compared to my limited experience of speaking in tongues and fist-fucking pulpits, this service was pretty mellow, I will admit. I mean, it was still loaded with persecution fantasies, hell threats, glorifications of faith, in-group reinforcements, and lies. But the most egregious moment came after the service when I was chatting with my dad, the pastor, and a couple other church members, and the discussion seemed to be revolving around the evils of secular education, specifically the evils of science education, what with it tempting children away from Jesus with all this evolution talk. And of course, I know that's part of it, right? I'm not Claude Rains shocked to find creationism going on here, but what truly shocked me was watching my dad play right along. Watching the man who taught me to love science in the first place, nodding along and agreeing that was all a tool of the devil. The dad that stayed up until 2 a.m. to watch meteor showers with me and try to get my shitty little telescope locked in on Mars for an hour in December. The dad that took me to science museums and planetariums and zoos and botanical gardens. The dad who worked his ass off his whole life so that he could give his 4 kids a secular college education. Now he's fallen right in line with the anti-science crowd. And it wasn't just a matter of playing along to fit in. On the car ride home, he stuck to his anti-evolution guns and even started offering up some Ken Ham-level flood apologetics. All this from a man whose intellect I respect the hell out of. All of this because some church found him when he was at the bottom of his life and now unblushingly extorted 10% of his income to fund their anti-knowledge platform. I had this feeling like I'd seen this bridge crumbling for 25 years and never said a thing, and then when it finally collapsed, my dad was on it. And after that, bygones could go fuck themselves. Because religion went after my dad when I wasn't looking. And I'm sure he's not the last person I love that it'll target, and I'm sure he's not the last one that it'll take. But the next time religion sinks its teeth into somebody that I care about, I'll be able to comfort myself with the knowledge that at least it had to do it with my spear in its side.